Hello and welcome. I'm Johnny, and here's my mic that is always kinda maybe slightly off screen, but I had it pushed around as I was setting up my office situation here. I'm looking forward to the future where I'll have the new iPhone iOS 16 type of situation with the desk mode camera if you set up your phone correctly and all of that cool stuff. But for now, all you get to see is my face and my desktop when I remember to switch to that lovely desktop view. Let me know in the chat how you're doing. Let me know if I'm not sharing my screen when it seems like I'm typing something important. And most of all, let me know what you want to learn today. The plan is SvelteKit and Playwright. This has been asked before. I've used Playwright quite a lot in the past couple of years, I'd say 1 year plus. And I was a Cypress fan for quite a long time, and I'm still subscribed to that thread where people are asking for the hard dependency on Mocha to stop, and then they can use Jest as well, get with the times. The Jest expect style matcher. But I do think at this point Playwright has leapfrogged Cypress development. Playwright, of course, has the backing of Microsoft, and we are fans nowadays of the Microsoft stack. If you said that to devs like 10 years ago, maybe they wouldn't believe it, but still, now VSCode, my editor, Microsoft. I push my code, GitHub, Microsoft. I test my stuff with Playwright, Microsoft. It's like all around. I sometimes use C# as well and Microsoft SQL servers and all of that, but not day to day. That's by the by. Today we will be setting up Playwright, and I will go to the agenda screen, the Notion document that I have of what we'll go through today. I've mentioned Playwright quite a few times. It is a behavior-driven development or end-to-end testing tool. It's something that can help you test your browser-based, web-based apps. Most of all, you can also use it to test your APIs, your endpoints, but I find it most useful when I'm testing something that runs on the browser. That's why it's been quite popular with SvelteKit testing as well. I know that a lot of the key core SvelteKit contributors, Svelte contributors really like Playwright, and I'm sure that some of them have helped Playwright become even better and get to the state where it's maybe like the leading one. Like it's either Playwright or Cypress for me. If you want a very good, very modern, E2E testing tool that can give you confidence, Playwright is the thing to use. You can't really go wrong with Cypress, but you can go wrong with lots of older tools that have become in the past. I do think Playwright may be the best one all around at this point. And why use it? It's because you want to deploy with confidence. You want to have meaningful tests. You don't want to have like silly unit tests that test, is this defined or is this not defined? Things that you can get around with by using something like TypeScript, for example. But let me switch to the chat. Hey, Evan. So Kevin says that they aren't sure how long you're gonna stay in this stream. Thanks for dropping by, and let me know even afterwards if you do catch up with the stream and have a question. I do look at the comments after the fact as well and try to answer all of them. I have been answering all of them so far, I think. Sometimes YouTube will hide comments from me, I don't know why. So if you say something mean about anything and I don't reply, it's not that I do not want to address it. Sometimes YouTube does try to stop some comments. So if you cannot not reach me with a YouTube comment, then feel free to go to my site and contact me. Reach out via my email address. Like there are lots of points where you can tell me what you want to learn, what you've been struggling with, if you've been enjoying the content, if you want me to talk more, talk less, all of that, please let me know. That's why we're doing Playwright today, because people have asked. I have done a video on Vitest and SvelteKit, which is a test-driven development, unit testing to integration testing tool, Vitest, a test runner. And that's one of the key ways one of the key ways that I have been testing my SvelteKit apps. And Vitest is super fast. It runs on Node, which is not running on the browser. Browsers are inherently slower to run. So testing with Playwright may give you more confidence because it's a real browser, but it can be hard to test all your edge cases. there, because the tests will take longer. Nobody wants like 2 hours of testing to run before they can merge the code and release it to production. So Vitest has been really good for that, but there are some things that you cannot really do with Vitest because you simulate the browser there. So things like uploading files, for example, and if you want to visually test something, of course, you cannot really do it on Vitest. That's where Playwright comes in, and tools like Playwright, and that's why we're going to learn how to set it up today. This is not going to be a video where usually I distill the knowledge and my research and your comments and everything else and put it into a 10-minute or 20-minute or anyway a streamlined video, a distilled essence of everything I've learned. This is going to take a bit of figuring out together. As I said, I have used the Playwright quite a lot the past year and a half, so we're not flying in completely with our eyes closed. So we should get somewhere. And with that, we've kind of described Playwright. Please ask more if you have more questions. And one of the ways to set it up with SvelteKit is to use the SvelteKit Wizard. So if you are trying to create a new SvelteKit app, a brand new SvelteKit app, the demo app that you can use the wizard to scaffold then will ask you about using Playwright if you want to set up a Playwright. So if you want to do, we'll go back to the terminal, you can name your app anything you want. And if you select the SvelteKit demo app, it will ask something about, do you want JavaScript with JS comments, which I know some core members of the Svelte team really like. I'm all about TypeScript. However, do you want linting? I guess yes. Do you want prettier? Definitely yes for me. And this is the point that we're trying to do in this live stream. When it asks for Playwright for browser testing, yes. And then we can get into that app and it will have created the files that we need to run Playwright, which is essentially a Playwright config that doesn't have quite a lot. It's also recommended to actually install your dependencies. It will have added Playwright in the list of dependencies, I can only imagine. Here it is, Playwright test. And that's about it. Example test of testing that the app is running. And that's about it. That's what the wizard will give you, which is enough. But what if you haven't done that? What if you haven't gone with the SvelteKit demo app or whatever else? What if you already have an app and you want to add Playwright? That's what we're gonna do now. Kevin has a suggestion that I've seen before as well. When I delete things or change to another file, I do it too fast. Apologies, I'm trying to get better at this. I try to get into the command palette and then say I'm going to package.json. But sometimes I don't think enough. So I will try to make it more explicit. I've deleted this and I've done this. I'm also in the market for a tool that will like highlight my cursor or anything really that would make it more obvious where I'm looking. Maybe that's something where some clever AI technology would be in. If it can follow my gaze and then focus on the thing that I'm looking at, that would be amazing. But yeah, as far as I know, that doesn't exist. There should be something like a magnifying glass spotlight tool, surely. If you know of something like that for the Mac, let me know. And Brian is also excited to see Playwright today. Breaking changes for the last SvelteKit release. I haven't updated if they happened this week. I know that Vite released its version 3, but Vite configuration has its own file. It always had its own file, right? Or is the latest SvelteKit release now having an exposed Vite config.js? I guess here it is. So yes, Brian, I have seen it just now live. It seems that they're doing this thing. So I guess the Vitest plugin for SvelteKit is no longer needed if the Vite config is exposed like this, which is awesome. I may do a quick follow-up for that video as well. So if you don't know, SvelteKit behind the scenes uses Vite as the transpiler. So if you have heard of Webpack, now all the raids, all the kids are using Vite because it's blazing fast and does a lot of its magic by exposing a Vite config.js. And it used to be that SvelteKit was kinda overriding this config behind the scenes, and we needed to extract it in order to have it run with Vitest. But now it seems it's gonna be easier because it's the other way around. SvelteKit is a plugin they add here, so it should be easier. Looks great to me. But yeah, that's another one of the reasons where I like to run the SvelteKit Wizard every once in a while, because then I can see what has changed since the last time I've created a new project. So almost always I go with the latest project that I've created and I've updated. I check that out from GitHub and then do the changes to create the new app that I need to build. But I will run the SvelteKit Wizard to see what it ends up with nowadays, because you can spot stuff like this, like, oh, now there is a fit config at the root, or of course the TS config at one point, instead of the one that was specifying every option here, we transition to the one where it's extending the SvelteKit config that SvelteKit will build when you start the dev server or you do the build. So yeah, run that every so often and you'll find all sorts of magic changes that you'll need to do on your SvelteKit app. So speaking of things to do on our SvelteKit app, what if we haven't added Playwright to begin with, and instead we want to add it after the fact? Maybe we had our proof of concept prototype out and then we want some confidence in order to catch breaking changes like this. I do think I have been asked before, do I recommend SvelteKit, even though during the beta there have been breaking changes? And I say yes, so long as you have some smoke tests. I do think the breaking changes have led to the build itself breaking, so you wouldn't, if you randomly upgraded, the build step wouldn't work and therefore you wouldn't be deploying a broken app. But that's probably not enough for me. If you do have tool like Playwright setup that does at least check every page that you have deployed in the app, and you can actually hit that page, I think that's enough confidence that the latest SvelteKit upgrade hasn't broken your app. So if you have that, then it's a bit easier to upgrade between SvelteKit versions while it's in beta, and therefore I do recommend to use it in production, except the one case that I keep mentioning. If you heavily rely on internationalization support, like if you have an e-commerce site in the EU in multiple languages, then you are taking a hit if you go with SvelteKit, because it doesn't have the out-of-the-box cool solutions, best-in-class solutions that Next.js and Next, as I hear, have. All right, so I will set up a focus noodle thingy for us, which is the thing I used to do 25 minutes of focus time. And I will open up our app. You may remember the Techy Cat app. Oof, Brian says that even the dev command has changed, so we'll need to change that to when we upgrade this app. So we've created this app on the previous stream. We've added some Stripe support that I will need to debug and fix, because I didn't finish it. I didn't have the time this week to wrap things up from the live stream. But everything else mostly works. So that's the thing that we want to test today. And if I upgrade to the latest SvelteKit version, I'll want to know that at least every link on this side, even that one, I guess, does work. This one is a big one. If you've done an upgrade and you cannot load this page, then something should tell me, like the build steps should tell me, don't deploy this. You don't want to deploy a broken site. So let's set up Tailwind. Who got here? Anyways, maybe this was one of my tests, this here thingy, because I can upload my own apps here, my own ideas here, but I haven't created like an emoji selector, so you can actually submit anything you want, any string here, which is a bit too much. Anyways, No Playwright in this app, and therefore if I were to release this, this stripe stuff that we were doing on the last episode, I would be releasing something broken, and we don't want that. Ideally, we want something to tell us this ain't working correctly. So we can bring in Playwright using a few ways, and the one they recommend, and I recommend as well, is do it using the VSCode plugin. So if you are using VSCode as well, I think this is a no-brainer. As I'll mention later, I do think the VSCode plugin is essential because it's the easiest way that I find I can run the tests. So Cypress is better at that, as far as I know, and as far as my experience has been. Cypress is amazing at having it run on a window on the side of your code or in a different screen or wherever else. And every time you save, it will rerun your tests. I find Playwright isn't as good at that, but I do find the VSCode plugin where you can run your tests and you can see the test output there. I do find that makes the BDD style experience where you add the tests, you have a breaking test, and you write the code to have a successful test, a green test, then that makes it much better. I think without the plugin, I would have stayed with Cypress at this point. Anyway, I will recommend the plugin. There are a few other commands that you may run yourself if you don't want to have the plugin or if you don't have VS Code, but I do have VS Code, so I can open the command palette with, I guess, Command Shift P and autocomplete install Playwright and see what that does. It will tell me which browsers to install, and even create a GitHub Actions workflow that we may edit afterwards. And when it's done, it will have created quite a few files. It will have added the artifacts that Playwright results, that Playwright creates rather, in the git ignore, so they won't be committed to version control. It will add Playwright test, and also reformat my package.json, so it would make it impossible to see the change, but all it's added is Playwright test. It will have added a Playwright config, and I like this one better because it has most options that Playwright provides along with a few comments, so you can know why would you need this or why would you want this. It also adds GitHub Action. I do use the main branch as the main branch, not master, because this is 2022. And it specifies the node version, I guess here, but I do believe that I'm on node 16x, so I have to change that to 16x there. Cool. There are a few more things to do in the GitHub Action, but first we need a test. I see that this time it has added a couple of files, a couple of test files. So in the test folder, it's added test examples as well as a test example.spec. And I don't know why it's done a couple. I guess the more things it can show, the better. But the one I'd rather have is this one, the smaller one, because we'll go to our website, this one, the Techy Cat, and look for this heading, I suppose. So a nice smoke test, I think, is to have a navigation test. So go to the homepage, check that the heading is what you expect, and then click all of those links and confirm that you get the headings that you want. I think that's a decent enough smoke test to stop you from deploying something broken. And of course, the more meaningful tests you have, the more confidence you'll get, but this navigation test will get you most of the way there. So first, let's see at another comment as well. According to what you're using for unit tests, so if you're using Vitest or Jest or anything else, you may have a matcher for catching any test that ends with spec.ts. And when you add Playwright, the Vitest test runner or Jest test runner or whichever unit test runner you have will also attempt to run this. Let's see if that's the case. So as it is, this is what happens here as well. So we will need to override that. What I usually do is I have the unit tests scan for a .test or .tests, .ts, and leave the .spec for the end-to-end Playwright tests. But also you could be looking, I guess, in the source folder for your unit tests, and then for the tests folder for your Playwright tests. Do whatever you want, but keep in mind that adding Playwright may have your unit tests break, because usually Vitest and Jest by default will check for file suffixes, those go in the end, right? That include .spec. So they will try to run this, but they cannot because it's Playwright. It's not a Jest or Vitest test. So how do we change that matcher? Vitest test pattern. Some live coding here. Test name pattern. Looks decent. It would be nice if it had the default one there, but it doesn't. So you may remember that now in our Svelte config, we have Vite key, which has all the Vite options that we have, and Vitest uses the test key here. This apparently has changed the latest version, something for me to do after the stream. But this claims that if I use the test name pattern here, I may be able to add a little blob pattern, which did GitHub Copilot try to help me there? Will that work? Am I using test? Yeah, it seems like I'm using test over there. So let's try to run the test again. Didn't quite work. So this looks correct. The key looks correct, but I need to find an example. What I actually want. GitHub Copilot didn't seem to do what I wanted. It is test.ts, right? So I had this thing. This was running before. So without this key, it will hit that test. Some tests are passing. With this pattern, it will find none. So clearly this pattern is not good. Let's see. Can be anything. And then it ends on test.ts. I may need to go to a regex tester. Found something. Found too many. Let's see. It's the test name pattern, not the file pattern. Globe pattern. What's exclude? Maybe not. All right, here it is. It's actually include. So I guess this one, the test name, is what it's trying to find. So this handle, this is the test name, not the test file name, which I thought that's what that was going to be. So it's actually the include key can be an array, and if I remove spec, let's say this, it should be happy. All right, cool. So all our .test files run. We only have one in this project, but that's by the by because of this. But the Playwright tests, which have the spec command, do not run. I guess you could also say like include stuff that are in the source directory anywhere, exclude things that are in the test directory, something like that, according to your preference. I kind of like having it be more obvious what type of test it is by the extensions, by the suffix of the test. So I can search for test, and then I can see the more unit tests, the Vitest tests, and I can search for spec, and then I can find the Playwright tests. That's why I like keeping one for the Playwright tests, another extension for the Vitest tests. Find that more useful. If you do as well, then remember to do this. Change your glob patterns, everybody. But, as I sometimes say, this is the Playwright video. So let's run some Playwright tests. I think this flipped out by changing the SvelteKit config. It's back. And now, what do we want? We want to run a Playwright test. We don't really want this example test. We want to run this test, and we can do that by having a test command. And most of my tests are Vitest, so you could have Playwright run with the test command, like if we were to have this be Playwright. But then the question is, when do you run the Vitest tests? So I like the test command running the unit tests, and then having a test e2e command that would run the Playwright tests. But will there really be end-to-end tests? Sometimes I do like mocking the outside dependencies, so maybe I want to mock Stripe or our auth provider or whatever else. So they're not really E2E. Depends, but it's arguing semantics at that point. Let me know what you prefer to do there. But what I usually do is indeed E2E. I do call them E2E. And to run the Playwright tests, all we got to do is Playwright test. And we can try to run this on the terminal. I'll get there. Just to make sure that my face is not covering this. So if I run the end-to-end tests now, they run it. And they pass, and I don't see anything cool because of the test run that we're using. Since I do have the Playwright plugin, it does mean, if I actually go here, so let me close this file. So if I go to the testing tab, because I have installed the Playwright VSCode plugin, which you can find here. If you search for Playwright, it's going to be the one by Microsoft, Tech, verified influencer Microsoft. Now my testing tab will have Playwright tests, and it will scan for anything that it thinks is a Playwright test. according to the Playwright config that we saw. So we can actually run this in line. And if I have that example test open, we can actually run it through this arrow thing or X thing, according to whether it's passed or not as well. And you can see the runner running through this. So if it gets stuck in a command, you'll see. And every time a command evaluates, you do see how long it took, which is also kind of neat. So if you have the test focused, you will see, oh, it's went through there. But what is it actually doing? Why can I not see this? It's because this is running in headless, I guess, test mode. It's what you want your CI to run. Maybe there will be some Chrome tabs and Firefox tabs running when I do this. But sometimes, especially when you're trying to do BDD, when you want to do behavior-driven development, you'll find that you want to see the browser, you want to see the test tool clicking around there. And that's the point I mentioned before, that I do find Cypress is a bit better at this, because having the test runner visually on the left is better there. I don't know if Playwright will do something to change it. But with this tool, where you can actually see how far it goes and where it breaks, you can actually write the tests that you want. So first thing is that, let's actually test. So this is not behavior-driven development, because I've developed all of this already. It's retrofitting some BDD. And I think we'll have an H1 somewhere, maybe not. Trying to see if this is an H1 actually. It should be. Should have an H1 on every page, and we don't. So more accessibility and more ACO performance by writing our tests. I'm doing all of this because I want to say that for this test, let's call it a navigation test. We can say we want to start at the home page. Then we go there. And we want the page to have a title of Techy Cat. Techy Cat. And then I guess we'll try to do the same thing afterwards. So let's find next ideas. We'll have a look at a better way to grab this later. Expect that this has this link, which I think is maybe not a great test, because you click it afterwards anyway, and then you expect that you are in the ideas page, so that should be fine. And at the end, after we've clicked that ideas thing, so I missed this, we want the title to be ideas. So indeed, we are not doing DDD, we're retrofitting some DDD here. So we can see that if we actually go here to the ideas page, we see this. So the title should be latest ideas. We can say we are now in the latest ideas page. So that's what we want to happen. And now if we run the tests, we can see that things fail because we haven't set up a baseUrl. So let's open our Playwright config and see what's happening there. We don't want to load environment variables from file. It's not at this point. Test directory is indeed this. Our timeout time is indeed this. Expectation timeout. Lots of stuff. So usually our CI, like GitHub Actions, sets the CI environment variable to true. And this is the trick that the Playwright often does in its config, where if you are actually running this as a GitHub action, it will have this setting or else it will have another one. So in this example, on CI, it will retry a test a couple times because nobody likes flaky tests, but they sometimes happen and you don't want to fail the whole pipeline, so it gives it a chance. But locally, it will just tell you this failed. It will never retry. Workers, no parallel testing during CI, which can also cause some troubles. But when we're running locally, it will use as many workers as it can to have them run faster. Then is the reporter, which it's using the HTML reporter by default, which I don't particularly like. Let me just double check here what reporter I actually use. I think I just remove that option. And then I like the one it's using by default a bit better. So if we run the tests here, on the left again, it's the one that gives like some ticks, and it gives you a bit more information on what failed and what succeeded instead of creating the HTML report. I like this reporter a bit better. There is one that supposedly works better, what works best when it's a GitHub Action that's running this, but I found that the output is usually not great. It will try to annotate the diff of a PR with what failed, but I just haven't found it that readable, so I just stick with this simple reporter for everything. Trace for failing tests, sure. Something that I wish was here would have been the capturing video. So I have this open in a different tab, and when something fails, this will create a video in one of the folders we're hopefully ignoring, so you can see what failed. And if you do what I like to do, which is submit videos in your PR of you actually going through the feature you've added, you may manually change this to on, and then every test you Playwright runs for you, it will record the video and you can attach it to your GitHub Action. You can send it on to Slack with to your fellow colleagues and say, this is what we did. And instead of you clicking around, it's Playwright clicking around. So, you know, automation for the win. But usually I leave it for retain on failure. So when something unexpectedly fails, I can go through the video and see why did it fail. What other commands do I like here? This project key defines against which browsers Playwright will run the tests. So Chrome, Firefox, Safari seems quite sensible. I definitely want to use like a mobile one because most apps are, most websites are visited on a mobile nowadays. So I think you can have as many as you want, but sometimes I do sacrifice desktop Safari because we're using mobile Safari. So if something breaks on like the simulated iPhone 12, then it would also be failing on desktop Safari. And I don't want to actually enable all of these because then the tests will be taking ages to run. So it's not to risk the time versus reward. Effort versus reward calculation of what you want to enable here. And another one, this will ensure that a web server starts before the tests run. And let's see what I've actually set up here. So we can uncomment this. This will npm run start or npm start if you hate writing more things than you need. This app does run on port 3000, but I think if I do try to start the tests now, it will also try to start the server, which will fail because I already have the test runner, the test running here. So you can add the reuse existing server command and just set it to true. Or if you want that to happen only during local development, you can do the am I running on CI trick and do this flag. So when it's on CI, it will actually start the server for you. You may want to change this to npm run dev, but probably not recommended. I will explain why afterwards. And now, however, since it will see that localhost 3000 is busy, it will say, you're probably running the server there yourself. So it will be happy, not try to npm start. It will just reuse existing server and run through the tests, which, as we've seen multiple times, have problems because we haven't set up a base URL, which I would have expected would have been an option here. And indeed it is. I just missed it within the comments. So now that the base URL is localhost 3000, then what we're doing here, where we just go to the index route, the home route, should work. So let's see what happens now to the tests. Let's use the test runner to see how far we get into the VSCode extension to run it through here. So cool. It seems we go to the index page, we find the title Techy Cat. We try to find something with the text ideas, but there are too many things that have the thing ideas somewhere. So how do we match exactly for this? This may be the point where I have to mention testing library, which is a great library for having meaningful tests, that helps you write meaningful tests that do not focus on the implementation details, as the tagline for that is. Do I actually have it here? Maybe not. So it's a huge project. Let me Google it further. I love it for running it with Vitest. I started using it back when I was doing React. Well, I'm still doing React very often, but back then in React, I was so jaded with Enzyme. I was starting to use the React test renderer manually, because Enzyme was all about artificially changing a component's state and not behaving like a user. So I would rather have React mount the JS DOM and then behave correctly when I simulated clicks and stuff like that. And then I found that Kenzie Dodds, key player in the JavaScript ecosystem for sure, has created this library which had this tagline that was like so confident and audacious. I was like, this can't be good. But actually, it's true. It does have selectors that help you test the things that really matter, that help you write tests, that do simulate how you describe a feature to a QA person or your project manager or whoever else. Like, I go to this page and then you find this button and you click this and you go there, instead of setting state left and right, because the QA person doesn't know what set state, React set state does. So I started using that for React. I am using it for Vitest tests and SvelteKit, and I was using it quite often, even with Cypress and even with testing library. But now I'm having second thoughts. I think, not second thoughts. Now I have different thoughts, because things evolve and things change. And Playwright now, doing all of that work, making sure with the React test renderer to get the accessible labels, get the correct inputs, click the correct buttons. It was quite a hassle. That's why I used testing library as a shortcut, because someone else had done the work for me. But now I think that Playwright has enough with its Locator functionality that you can yourself find things in an accessible way without too much work. But I haven't used it that much so far. When I've been using Playwright the past couple of years, I have been using the Playwright testing library, which is based on the Puppeteer testing library, and it's been mixed because the test output when tests fail is unusable. So I want to give the native way, I guess, to select things through the Locator method in Playwright. Easier said than done, probably. It's this. So I want to find a role link. I think that's a valid role. And then the text in the link should be ideas. So let's see if that will find this or not? And if not, will it give me a meaningful test, meaningful error? Oh, interesting. Name. So this, I made it up. It says it's not a real thing, but maybe name is good. All right, we did it. Oh, interesting. The to have title thing is the page title. So it's, I guess, what you get here. Huh. Interesting. It's not the H1, which is something that we want to fix as well. So let's do that as well. Page locator heading. I want to find a role heading. GitHub Copilot claims this will work. But will it tell me that I made it up? Like level is not a real thing. I guess it was good. So my H1 heading, I wanted to have text Techy Cat. And then, after I've clicked here, I'd want my heading to have text latest ideas. Would that work? I guess not. So does it find an H1? That's a good question. But really quickly, if we go to the code and search for get inspired by, I'm trying to get to this element. This one, if I make that an H1, does this change the tests for the better? Let's see. Interesting. Pressing this doesn't find the test result. Interesting. But pressing this does run it. Where am I? So it seems my Vitest plugin is not behaving well enough. I wanted to press this. All right, made it all the way. So now that we have an H1, then it is passing. So if I change my H1 to be, I don't know, something else, this, then I expect this to fail. But the problem is that I expected this to fail before because we didn't have any H1s, right? So I guess this locator doesn't throw when it cannot find the element. It's not great. So let's go to the docs and see what's happening there. Strictness. I'm trying to find what happens if I cannot find anything in the selector. Blah, blah, blah. Interesting. So what does it return here? returns a locator. And the locator is evaluate. Great. Oh well, we'll figure it out eventually. For now, we know that we have an h1. If we had multiple, does it crash? So if we had another one, would it crash? Because from kind of preparing this, I thought that it did. All right, so when it resolves to 2 elements, it's upset. When it resolves to 0, it's not. Which is a bit silly. But fair enough. I guess with this we have confidence that our main page does have the heading that we want, Techy Cat. The other page does have the other heading that we want, so we've successfully navigated there. I should be changing the heading, the name of that route as well. So no meta information here. I should have some. So let's kinda TDD this and say that now I expect the page to have title indeed latest ideas. So I want that to include latest ideas. It's gonna fail tragically. But now I can use the Svelte head tag to say latest ideas here. Now my example spec should be passing, which is great news. And this shouldn't be called get started. We don't need this comment. I'm not sure I want to explicitly check for this attribute. I don't think the user cares what the href is. So we can say navigate so can we just do it in like one line? Looks like the answer is yes. And if I go to my header and remove this link, I'm hoping that this test will fail. Awesome. So according to the timeout, this should take 5 seconds to fail. It's taking too long. It's taking 5 hours. Will it ever break? Will it retry again? Is it that I'm not allowed to press click if it doesn't exist? Yeah, this is longer than I wanted. Oh well, you get the idea. Like if I somehow forget this, then this breaks. And I add it back in. It's all well and good. We can change this to like the navigation spec. And we can also add test for the about page. And then I guess the profile or login page. I wonder what I call this when I'm not logged in. But we'll take a small break to talk about this. Hopefully it passes. It passes here as well. And maybe let's finish this section by having it run on, I can actually see the browser running through this mode. And for that, I do have a command that I like. So what you need to do is to specify that you want it to run like headed mode, I suppose. But Playwright will add some things for you. So let me just check what that is. So much like our E2E test for Playwright test, it's going to be the same, and I'm going to call it debug. You can also call it like BDD mode, because maybe that's what you want to use when you are doing behavior-driven development, but I'll call it debug for now. Because if you set the PW Playwright debug flag to 1, environment variable to this, then Playwright will set a few things that make it a bit easier to run it on debug mode, I suppose. That's the point. And since I don't want to run it on multiple browsers, I will specify that I only want to run it on the Chromium or Chrome project, or whichever else project that I like from that Playwright config ts projects array. So I'm only gonna run it on the one I've named Chromium, which is using the desktop Chrome device. If you want to run it on, you know, mobile Safari or whichever else, all you have to do is use the appropriate name in your command. And, well, let's see this running. So now, if I npm run, that didn't quite work. That didn't quite work. Let's run it like this first. It was happy now. So now it opens up every single one of the projects that we have to run the navigation spec that we've just written, and you can go step by step, or you can just use the play icon and it will run everything for you. And yeah, I guess this is the mobile Safari one. And if you think that is too fast, you can actually set the, well, can you actually do something? I don't think so. Cypress has a more sensible way to do this. When it types and fills out forms, it is a bit slower. But what I found is that Playwright has an option that I just needed to look up again. So if we go back to our Playwright config in the use key, the one that has the base URL and all that stuff, we can add a launch options key, which can have a slow-mo key, which can be, I guess, if it's on CI, then you can have it be as fast as possible, and when you're doing local development, it can be slow. However, if you do this, it will always be slow, no matter whether you're opening up the browsers or not, whether you're seeing it or not, which is kinda useless. So now in this test, you can probably see that it does hang around the ideas and about page slightly longer, but not too long. But what I like is to set up another environment variable for this. So I make up the slow-mo environment variable and then use that. So I can parseint that environment variable, or 0, as Copilot is saying. So it's either not going to do slow-mo or do it as slow as I specify in the slow-mo environment variable. So when I do the Playwright test command here for the E2E debug one, I can say slow-mo, like, 50 or something like that. Let's see what I've used before. 50, I think I found works fine. So let's try that again. So when I do debug, it will be slightly slower. Again, it would have been more obvious when you're doing forms, which is a great place to do your Playwright tests. But when you're doing your regular iterative test command, it will not wait for anybody. When it's running on CI, it will not be waiting for anybody. It will be as fast as it can. But let's have a look again on the project flag as well. So in theory, let's delete all of these. Let's have another look on the Playwright YAML. Nope, sorry, on the Playwright config. And we're saying that projects name Chromium. So that feels like it should work. I'm trying to say that you're doing Playwright test and I want to pass a command to this to say run project Chromium. Only run this. Will it not work again? Let's see. Yeah. Doesn't work. So let's set it up here. We are testing this, and it is claiming that this is what it's gonna do. And this is the Playwright test config. It's projects. This is it, right? Projects, array, name Chromium. This is it. So it should only be running this. Huh. Would npx make it any different? Because it's saying pass it like this. I wouldn't think so, but who knows? Who knows? Why did that work? Anyway, I don't know why, but it did work. Well, let's take our well-learned break and think about why that worked. Hello Anu and hello Iago, both saying hi in the comments. Nice to see you as well. And yes, I am doing well. I think on every string I mentioned how warm it is in Barcelona, and this weekend it's 33, 34 degrees at this moment. So I'm not doing well because I thrive under this weather. I love the solar poweredness of it all. But I'm definitely armed with iced coffee, lots of water. I'm already visualizing the ice cream I'm gonna have later. And I think that's key to surviving under that hot climate. And yeah, you may have noticed today no music, because I have been using a service that gets you copyright-free music. So it's actually a genius idea, where they've created a Spotify and an Apple Music and a whatever playlist that you can stream, and they've worked with artists to actually get the license for those tracks and ensure that YouTube or Twitch or whoever else is not gonna content ID copyright strike you when you use it. And I've been happy with it. When you stream it, of course, on Spotify or Apple Music, then they get a cut, which is ingenious. So, you know, I don't pay them. Nobody pays them, but yet they make money because lots of people use that very, very clever service. However, I have gotten copyright like claims or content ID matches or whatever they call it, even though I was using the tracks in previous streams, which doesn't matter to me because I don't get any ad revenue because I'm not a YouTube partner. But still, I see that notice like, oh, copyright claim there, and it's not nice. I have to like mute the audio. I have to do something there. It's just I want everything in my YouTube feed to look the same and have no copyright claims. So for the next one, I think I'll prepare like my own jam list, my own playlist from. I was using Epidemic Sound, but I'm gonna use Artlist. I'm gonna try that one out as well. If you have suggestions on what to use for that sort of music, let me know. I am partial to like more techno Mass Effect style beats on the background. And Yagos says, good to head all to the beach. Yeah, I've been doing some weekends on the beach, not Fridays though. And it's been quite nice. I've been braving getting a bit further out from Barcelona. I think the first one I did was what every tourist does, which is make it all the way to Sitges, which isn't that far. But I've been to quite a few. And I think the ones that are a bit further to the north, I like more. So where did I go last week? I don't remember. When I was going south, I made it to Tarragona, which was decent as well last week. Where did I make it? I don't remember. Maybe it also starts with a T. But anyway, I went there. I went up to a SUP board and then made it into deep sea and just lie down with the sun hitting me. But I was wearing a hat and sunglasses, so it was all good in the end. All right, let's get back to work. Let's review what we've done so far. So we've talked about Playwright. We did the Playwright setup with the SvelteKit Wizard, which also gave me the news flash, as you did in the comments as well, that now with Vite 3, they're doing a different style of setup with SvelteKit. It's like, what? But we also added Playwright to our existing app, Techy Cat. I've went through my recommended settings, which maybe now that we've actually created some, I will go through. So we created this file using the command install Playwright of VSCode because I have the Playwright plugin, and it will give you comments and it will add the annotations on some of the flags that it likes. However, the important ones that we've changed is the baseUrl. This is hidden and you should uncomment it and have it be whatever you're using locally. So the default port is usually 3000, but maybe it's something else for you because you don't like conflicts. I think that's a good idea. And if you want to really use this for end-to-end tests, you can actually get this as an environment variable. So if you're deploying to Vercel, maybe you can have Vercel say to the GitHub Action that this thing I've actually deployed to this preview URL. So Techy Cat app.vercel.app or whatever the link is, it can feed it to the Playwright config, and then it will hit the actual deployment, not the dev server or whatever server you're running here, which ensures that you're testing something end-to-end, which always gives the most confidence. But sometimes you do want to be in control of things. Brian also asks, do I speak Spanish? No hablo español. I can order coffee, so I can say now on the spot. I forget everything as well. Café con leche de avena, por favor, con tarjeta to pay with card, and adios, gracias, muchas gracias is the most that I've learned. Mi novia, my girlfriend partner, fiance now, lived in Portugal for many years, 7 years. And speaks Portuguese fluently. And apparently that's enough to speak enough Spanish for me to get around town. And of course, I can never be out of the house unsupervised because I get lost. So it's been helpful to go out along with my fiance and have her do the hard work of communicating with everyone. But everyone is so nice, so long as I smile enough, which I do naturally, everyone has been very keen to help me and try to understand what I'm trying to say. I have been surprised though with like in Greece, I guess because we depend so heavily on tourism, it seems that most people will know a decent amount of English, but here in Barcelona, it's like not most people, like most people don't speak a lot of English, which is, you know, fair enough. Spanish is much cooler or much more popular language than Greek, so you can't really expect anybody else to know of it. And I do not speak Catalan either, which would be a goal of mine because I do speak French, so they say that this should be easy for me. All right, so do I speak Spanish? Tansen, Dan, I love those sorts of questions for sure. That's why I talk about those things too much. But recommended things we've added in our Playwright config, the lance options. So we've added this lance option slow-mo, which when you're filling forms, especially you'll feel this, it will make Playwright delay the typing of the commands a bit more. So it will behave a bit more like a QA person and not go blazing fast. So if you do a video on to demonstrate the new form that you've built or your new feature, it will actually be visible and not be over in like 10 seconds, in 10 milliseconds. So you can actually submit it in Slack to somebody else and they can see your automated test runner going through the new feature you've added. So I do like this slow-mo command. I do add a video retain on failure, which when it fails, it will add the test results video here, and you can review it and see what actually went wrong. You can see that, oh, validation went out because the email address was not valid. So I should change this to actually account for the address to be valid when something happens, or whatever else. I do think the video features are quite cool. Not as good as the Cypress ones, but getting there. They're almost as good. Projects, it gives you a few sample devices that you can run your tests against. And I've suggested adding at least one mobile one, because usually your traffic would be mobile. So mobile Safari, probably the hardest one to test, the one that's most likely to be angry with the way you've set cookies or whatever else. So make sure to test some Safari ones as well. And we've also specified a way here for Playwright to start the dev server on its test step, which is important for our GitHub action. So if we look back to our agenda here, we did talk about why I'm trying not to use Playwright testing library anymore versus using the native Playwright selectors here, because I think if we take the time to figure out how the new Locator API works, we can have accessible tests like this, where you can specify that I want a link, or I want a heading, or I want an article, like one of the roles that are actually valid. And then check for a name here. And that will result in a better test output in case of failure, which with the testing library selectors, that's almost unreadable. When I'm using the testing library with Vitest or Jest in React or SvelteKit or wherever else, then the test output is amazing. But the test output when using the testing library selectors in Playwright, I think is unreadable because it prints out the whole DOM and it's too much work to just filter out the things that you need. So I'm giving a chance to using the Locator API, which produces better test input, the debug output when the test fails. And also, I think that's quite like elegant and readable. So not too bad. I've been liking it so far. We may do something more complex later and I'll let you know. We've talked about debug mode. Goodness, we've went through quite a lot of stuff. I've talked about how with, maybe I'll run it again and see what I'm trying to talk about. So I can run this on debug mode and it will open the app for me, and I can go through it step by step according to what my test has specified. But there is also a record mode where I can press this and say, oh, I want to click on like this element. And it will add locators for me, and it will try to guess what I'm trying to expect. I think this is decent. I'm only realizing it now because I didn't used to use the Locator API, which didn't exist. I used to use the testing library selectors. So all of the things of the record functionality of the debugger would be useless to me because I wouldn't want to use them. But now this looks quite cool, actually. So open the debugger and go through each step of the test as you please. You can see that, you know, sometimes it will fail, I guess, because we manually navigated somewhere else. That's why it did fail. So yeah, now that I'm not using the testing library selectors, maybe the step-by-step debug mode thing is not that bad. Maybe it's actually usable, this thing. And you can actually open the one test that you want to focus on here. So that's pretty good. But what I've been using so far, which also work with the testing library selectors, was the Playwright extension, which gives you this Playwright tab here, and you can add any test or any subtest, anything you've grouped here, and it will run through inline if you have that file open as well, and you can see that it failed on this step, it failed on that step. So if you're trying to make up the thing that makes your test go boom, it's much easier to do it using this library, and then go to your implementation and make the test go green. All right, so we've actually done quite a lot. We've talked about this too. And now we're going to set up a GitHub action. That'd be fun. So we have a GitHub action already that our install Playwright command created for us. So this isn't one of the videos where I've done all the work beforehand and I tell you, oh, we have this like huge file already. This thing created most of all of this file, and we changed a few things here. And the way it is currently, I think will work. So it installs our dependencies. It specifically installs Playwright as well with the deep dependencies, I guess with the browsers as well. And then it's gonna run the npx playwright test command, which is probably something we'd want to change. We'd probably want to run our test command, which in this case happens to be a playwright test, so the same thing, but it's likely in the future we'll actually be doing something else there. So maybe we can change this to npx playwright test, because we found that it's different sometimes. But we want to ask to run npm run test e2e to ensure that whatever we're doing locally is the same that our GitHub action is doing. All right, so fundamentally that's enough, but how will the dev server run? In this case, we've specified in the Playwright config that npm start runs the dev server, the web server, which is not true. npm run dev would actually run the server. But what we may want to do is build the SvelteKit app and then serve it. And the way we do that is it with preview actually? Maybe. So I think it's not start, it's preview. Let's run it here. Oops. Right, so this is promising. Preview. Let's go to the docs and check that out as well. Run the production version locally. Great. Vite preview nowadays. In our version, it's not, but it should be the same thing. So on our Playwright config, we can say that if we npm run preview, this will start the dev server. So that's all we need to do. So I guess we don't need something else here. I was thinking that maybe we need like a build step beforehand, but it looks like that's not the case. So let's see what happens if we commit all of these things. Add playwright tests. Playwright navigation smoke tests. States everything. Sync it up. And see what happens. So if I go to the Techy Cat GitHub, we should have something new. Just create a pull request. And the way we've set up this, it will only run the Playwright tests against pull requests to main and pushes to main. So if I didn't open the pull request, it won't run the end-to-end tests, which you may want to maybe save money, or you may want, so you won't be triggering the test suite, the end-to-end test suite, unless you're really serious, unless you really want to merge the code to the main branch and eventually deploy it. So the test suite is another command that I've had, which runs the Vitest tests, and they still run because we've added something to resolve the conflict with the test file name extensions. And will this pass? Who knows? This takes a bit longer to install and run, but this is indeed the automated tests running in an automated way with a GitHub Action. I did get npm install randomly failing in a Next.js app I was working on over the week, and I found explicitly saying do not install the browsers would work. Ooh, interesting. So the web server didn't start. I wonder why. I wonder why. We saw it working locally. Is it because we hadn't built yet? Maybe. Is it because we need to build, then do it? Was I right? Let's see. So it could be that this. Let's say we haven't done this at all. Don't run this. npm run preview. Right, so I guess we need to build first and then run preview. Great. This is more in line to what I expected. But this does mean that before this, we'd need to build. So build app. At the build step. And then the dev server, the preview server should be able to start. So I'm gonna force push this and see if that works any better. This is a decent place to mention that if you've got environment variables, you may want to include them, you probably want to include them in your GitHub Actions as well, which makes it a bit more complicated because usually we add the environment variables in VSCode, not in GitHub. But doing it this way does mean that we need to add them in two ways, in two places. And we have a public Vite superbase URL, an anonymous key, and a stripe publishable key. All of these get transpiled into strings during the build step, which means that our build step here will need to have them. I also have a stripe secret key and stuff like that are not transpiled at this time, which should, I understand, be available when the test server runs, so in this step. So let's take it one step at a time and see how we would be adding the environment variables here. And it is by adding, during the build step, an env key for environment and mentioning that we want all these three things, I suppose. And we want this to be, so this is going to be like a magic thing. And I do have a GitHub Action plugin as well, which should help me autocomplete that stuff. But it also means that I'll need to go to GitHub and actually set this these environment variables there too. So I have these set in VSCode, but now I'll need to add them to GitHub as well, because GitHub is also going to be building this app. You can get around all of this if you, as we mentioned previously, if you, instead of visiting localhost 3000 locally, if you went to wherever VSCode has deployed your app, that may be a better idea actually. But hey. So this, I believe, will probably have failed again. And I'd imagine this time there would be that the build step failed. So yeah, build step fails because baseUrl is not defined, because it is not passed in this build step. So we can go into secrets for the actions, and we have these two already, but I guess we didn't pass them in time. And I also need to add the publishable key, the Stripe publishable key, which very quickly I'll have to copy. I do cycle these keys again and again, but just in case, I will not show my screen for just a moment. Touch my hand for but a moment. Name the game that this quote is from. We're back. And now my helper will not know that I've uploaded this to GitHub. If I restart VSCode, it will know again. And that's by the by. Can add this setup and once again do my force push commit. And I believe that this time our GitHub action should work, because the build should be fine. Again, if we were having VSCode give us the URL to visit, the deployed URL, we wouldn't need all of this. Now that we are running the server locally, we may need to feed some environment variables to this step as well. So if you have a Stripe secret key, for example, we would need an env key here as well. But we won't be using that for this video, so we should be fine. So I'm hoping that this will give us a check mark with the GitHub action, and then we can try to BDD a Svelte component or something like that. We can talk about component testing, which is an experimental feature Playwright has, and Cypress is also experimentally adding. It's all the rage nowadays. I'm not like super thrilled with it. As I said, for testing edge cases and components in isolation, I really like Vitest or Jest or anything like that, any node test runner. I prefer Playwright for more BDD end-to-end tests, so I wouldn't actually use it for this. And let's also talk about automated authentication. So you may have noticed that I have ignored this part where you can actually log into the app and then you get the ability to, the server is not running. If you're logged in, you can do a few more things, like you can actually start some ideas. I haven't tested this for now, And it's because authentication is a bit trickier when you're doing automated testing. We're also doing magic link authentication here. The only way to sign in is with magic links, so that's harder to automate. However, Playwright does have a way to set up to remember your state. So if you manage to go through the login flow, you can actually save your cookies and your local storage and everything like that somewhere. And then in the other tests, you can put those cookies back into your browser and be authenticated for all other of your tests. So you can do authenticated testing, but you'd need a way to get those cookies and local storage and whatever settings in the first place. And for now, since we're only doing magic link authentication, we cannot do that. I cannot manually go and click around the UI and then save whatever cookies have been left. And even if I were, that would expire in like, 1 day or 1 week or however long we need. So what we need is a solution with Supabase, I suppose, where we can say that for this specific user or with this API key, please give me credentials, please give me a JWT, log the automated test runner in, and then after we've done this programmatically, not going through the flow, not checking emails and all of that, it would be able to run all of these tests as an authenticated user. This can be simpler if you have an email and password authentication here. So if we were allowing for an email and password, that's an easier way to do it. If we had two-factor authentication required for our app, then that'd be impossible to end-to-end test. But you usually leave like a backdoor for a test user for something like that, but it's very tricky. The moment you start doing things for your tests, then you're not really testing your real app, and the moment you're leaving backdoors left and right, then that's when you add to your surface area for being hacked. So really, testing authenticated functionality, very important for every app, but it's something that needs its own dedicated session and dedicated video to do. Right, so I see all those X's, but I believe this could have passed, and I believe wrong. Is this gonna be the end of the video? Oh, cool, made it somewhere. So it builds the app, and then it would be great if we could see the output. That's something that Cypress does quite easily because they want you to pay money for that feature, I suppose, is that you can see the video in a nice UI that they have there. So not all the tests, but one test did pass. And I wonder why that happened. Let's double check again and see what we're telling the GitHub Action to run is this. Good. Not good. This is what we're telling the GitHub Action to run. And it passes here. It's kind of worrying. So if we build and then we preview and then we run, it's passing just fine. So I can only think that the problem may be that there is an environment variable that's not set. I can give that a try and then we can move along to the next point. But no, even this is failing. So yeah, it would be great to check the test artifact there. We do know that the artifacts do exist in here. So let's see, let's upload the artifact somewhere. Oh no. That's what we wanted. Like, I want a way to check out that video, but I don't really know how. Like, I can see what it is. But I imagine that it just doesn't open the page, sadly. So I will have to go back to face mode and check the other environment variable that I have, which is indeed the Stripe secret key, and go back to GitHub. I will narrate this. I'm intentionally not showing my screen. So GitHub, secrets, actions, a new one. It's the Stripe secret key, which is all of this. It's not that long. And I can add this. And then I think I can show my screen and say that during the run step, we have a Stripe secret key. And that should be fine. And if that doesn't work, then I guess we'll try to visit whatever Vercel has deployed. The problem is that it's kind of tricky to inform a GitHub action where Vercel has deployed. There are there is a way to do it, but it's not super straightforward. That's why I'm not super willing to do it. But in any case, when this force push happens, the deployment will run. We can check the deployment with our own eyeballs and check that it's fine. So GitHub action get Vercel deployment URL. I don't actually want the Vercel action because we're integrating in a different way. But we want something to trigger based on a successful deployment. So this completes, and this knows that this has been deployed somewhere. Ah, so fast. Fast failure. We'll check it out. It deploys to here. And that's what I want to see. So it deploys to this URL. It seems fine. It seems like it has like the title that we expect to see and not an empty title like the other thing says. So it's kind of weird. But let's see why it failed this time. Yeah, it's the same thing. It goes there and yet it's nothing. So I'll take a small thinking break here live and see how we can get this URL and actually test this against the Vercel deployment. So we don't need to mess around with the environment variables that Vercel already has, no need to duplicate them, and have more confidence because that's the actual deployment. So deployment completes, then I want this GitHub action to run. How do I do this? Run GitHub action after Vercel deployment. That's not what we want. Run test against Vercel. Yeah, what I'm seeing here is that it's manually doing the Vercel deployment, which I don't really want. I want this preview URL. This is great, but I want it in a separate file, I suppose. because that would be the maximum coolness. And since I am Googling things, I may as well try one more thing, which is, let's try to run the dev server this time. And say that we don't have a build step. Get this ever happen, run the playwright tests, and we have all these environment variables. And then this starts. And I'm not gonna force push this. This time I am gonna make a different commit saying try to run playwright tests against dev server, and we can have a look and see if that somehow worked. So my query is simple. It's I do not want to deploy the Vercel in the GitHub action, but after a successful Vercel deployment, I want a GitHub action to run, if that makes sense. So here's some live Googling for us. And I might as well keep this open. Because who knows, maybe this will work. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. Yeah, all of these seem related. But I didn't dream this. I'm pretty sure I've done this before. I have successfully gotten the Vercel deployment URL with a GitHub action. So yeah, this output will this just work and save me from trying to debug this? Maybe. I give it some chance. No chance. So how do we get this action? Just don't know what to Google, that's a problem. GitHub action get Vercel deployment URL. Await Vercel deployment. Promising. Very promising. All right. It's great. So wait for Vercel deployment. This seems very promising. I think this may have been the one that I've used before. We want to forward this. Next right now, what's this? Something to check later, I suppose. We need a Vercel token, I guess. But yeah, that's not what we want to do. What does this wait for Vercel thingy do? 2 years ago, feels too old. What about this one? One we've been reading about 10 months ago, more promising. But right, this I wanted to be dynamic. How do I know this? The domain you want to wait for, but I don't know this. I can get the Vercel token, but this may have like a hash, right? This is more complicated. That's what we want to see. But yeah, definitely this is something for me to check offline. I'm quite sad that this didn't work because we were flying through these things. I can't believe we went through all of these bullet points so far. And the stumbling block was setting up a GitHub Action. I was hoping that the output would have been a bit better. But yeah, like it fails immediately on the running the app and even uploading this artifact to see the video. Maybe it would have given us an error for us to see. Oh well. I will try it again. I will update the SvelteKit version 2, as there have been big changes with Vite also upgrading to version 3. But I think this is going to be it for now. So usually we end with a win, but today we did end on a fail. And this is what happens when you work with CI and CD systems, like the initial setup, I do find those take quite a lot of work, but then you have your mind at peace for whatever else for a long time. I didn't know how long this would take, but I do have like a separate page for video games I've been playing lately. Like I used to play a lot of video games, like 20 years ago, and I've stopped for quite a long time. But now finally I have a bit more time to play again. I've been making a list of the games that I've enjoyed. So if any one of those live streams actually ends a bit faster, we can discuss what I've been playing around with on my spare time. I will give, as always, last chance to the chat. If you have more questions about Playwright, I'll definitely look this up more, and I definitely plan to eventually make like the definitive distilled SvelteKit and Playwright video without me having to Google so much stuff all the time. In the meantime, feel free to check out the SvelteKit and Vitest video that people have been enjoying so far. I really enjoyed it too. I mostly do the testing videos for myself and to share with the other engineers I work with, because I find in real world settings they are extremely important. Like having a good test suite is super important and allows you to go fast very quickly. So it's not within 2 years time we'll have made up the time that we spent creating those tests and debugging the CI pipelines and all of that. I think very quickly, like within the sprints, you get faster if you automate that sort of thing. But sometimes it is boring to set it up. Very often when you do your own project on the weekends, you may opt to not set up Vitest or Playwright. But I do find this, like it's kind of like beach volleyball or football or whatever else you play, like where they say that you perform as you train or you play as you train. So if for your fun or your hobby or your learning, if you do use TDD and BDD and those practices, then for work, you'll also be more comfortable using them. So there is value there. If you use it more, you get better at it. So if you get more comfortable TDDing and using test tools when you are prototyping and horsing around, then it'd be easier to do it for work. And then it'd be easier to do it during interviews, other sorts of tests and reviews. And that would make you better at your job and better at getting higher rates. So it's quite important in that front as well. But yes, I do believe this is enough for now. My plans for later is to try to play a bit of paddle, which has been taking up the Mediterranean world by storm. And I hear that even in London and other places, quite a few paddle tournaments are spinning up. This is like the tennis plus squash hybrid, or ping pong hybrid. I don't know how to call it. It's been quite fun. No beach volleyball, but still quite fun. All right. Thanks a bunch for watching. I may see you on Sunday and have another stream follow-up to this, or the Stripe stuff that we did last week. Tuesday as well. Friday I will be flying, so not exactly next Friday, I don't think, but next Friday we'll also be back. Thanks a bunch for choosing to spend your time with me. Apologies for ending on a CI pipeline failure, but it happens. And once again, hope you have a lovely time. See you around.